This is Thronefall, a medieval-based defense game where during the day you build and upgrade your castle, and at night you defend your walls against waves of enemies. We are Paul and Jonas, indie game developers by heart and nature, and we've been working on this game for precisely 64 days so far. I know that because I'm recording and documenting every single day we're working on this game. You can check out the previous 3 parts of this devlog series on my YouTube channel. In this video we're gonna make a bunch more progress, so better have a close look, because you're not gonna be able to recognize the game by the end of the video anymore. In Thronefall at the moment you can't choose what to build where, you can only choose when to build it, because there are these predefined build slots. For example, this mill and these fields here will generate some income every day. Once you're ready, you call the knight and defend against a wave of enemies with a very basic combat system that basically just requires you to spam one button on the keyboard. The next morning you collect your taxes and use them to build even more buildings. And the cycle continues till eventually you fight some epic battles in and around your castle fortifications. One thing we want to do with Thronefall is eliminating a bunch of frustration points that players would usually have with these kinds of base defense games. So for example, one thing we're doing is we're respawning all of the buildings for free in the morning, so you never have to spend money on repairing anything or something like that. So the next thing you can see me work on right here is making your units respawn as well, and they should even do so at night, because your units are all gonna run in and die like the idiots they are. And then if it's just you left defending the castle, that looks a little weird, so we definitely want a constant stream of units to kind of keep the action going. After a little bit I got that working, so now as long as your barracks is alive, it will keep pumping out reinforcements. I made it so whenever you die you get a 10-second respawn timer, so all in all it's very forgiving, and we'll just counterbalance that by making other parts of the game more difficult. Speaking of which, as all of the main gameplay systems were complete now, it was time to get a little overview over all of the numbers and get started with the balancing, which is a process I enjoy very much because it allows me to be creative, but it's also very mathematical and logical at the same time. There are generally some really simple formulas you can use to see if a unit is overpowered or underpowered, so that helps you to get a rough estimate, but there are also a couple of factors that are not as easily quantifiable, like for example, how much is it worth that a unit can respawn, or what's the value of having additional attack range, what's the value of movement speed. Then on top of that we want to add another layer of unique strengths and weaknesses to each unit. So at that point the only way to realistically get anywhere is to play the game a lot. A common misconception people have about balancing is that it's about making everything equally powerful, whereas it's actually not about that at all. Balancing in strategy games is way more about carving out a niche for everything and making everything situational. Or in other words, all of the tools you give the player should be useful at least some of the time. Otherwise, what's the point of putting them in the game? So while Paul was doing some actual development work, I was just repeatedly playing the game over and over and over in order to improve some numbers. Okay, first act of the day, you can always see the attack indicator now. And then second act of the day was to add back in some custom post-processing that allowed us to put a gradient on top of everything. So at this point you can see we're still experimenting with the visuals and haven't really settled on anything yet. We also started playtesting with some friends.
Oh shit, die Hunterlings, wenn man die selber töten muss, sind die ganz schön stark. Oh. Das sieht lustig aus hier.
In the morning I checked out some unit models Paul made. This is the ogre. I feel like the ogre should have wider shoulders or something. This is the melee unit. The hunterling. Catapult is not. Still work in progress.
Würde ich sagen, ist eher low here, the wish to be able to dodge arrows.
Yeah, this is low. Here you can see us sort through the first round of playtester feedback, color coding everything depending on the priority of the task. At this point our main priority is really to get the gameplay right. Game developers always say fix fun first. Joking, nobody says that, I just made that up. I think we should say that though. We definitely should. Addressing feedback from playtesters, increasing the unit count so battles feel more epic. Playtesters also wanted to be able to build an entire wall at once instead of having to build individual wall pieces, so voila, that works. Meanwhile, Paul is updating more and more of the art. Whenever you watch fast-paced devlogs like this, remember that reality looks more like this. You just stare at the screen trying to figure out the source of a bug. And the reason I want to mention that is because I do want to paint a realistic picture of what game dev is like. Again. Freak! All of the little things we speed through in these devlogs are usually paid for with a lot of sweat and tears. Next up I started work on a mesh generator tool for making paths, and instead of explaining what I mean, I'm just gonna show you. You can define a path by placing a couple of points, and you can also define the width of the path at each point. I added some features to smooth out the paths a little bit, so now we can build some pretty paths directly in Unity without leaving Unity, which is a big advantage. "71 days already. Time really flies." I spontaneously had another cool idea what I could use my path system for, because I thought if you scroll a texture over it, it could probably look almost like a river. It was about time to replace those crappy placeholder rivers anyway. Paul built some pretty scenery and sent me a screenshot. I tried for a while longer to make the paths look somewhat acceptable, but it was more difficult than expected. So yeah, let's just leave the visual stuff to Paul and go back to designing some gameplay systems. The next gameplay system I wanted to work on was the meta progression. So I have two ideas for progression systems. In one progression system, you can pick different perks, different weapons, unlock stuff, and there are lots of basically different perks and weapons to choose from, so there are lots and lots of possibilities to recombine them. And the other system I had in mind is where you just choose a character, and the characters all have different perks and abilities. I'm not entirely sure what I find more interesting. After consulting with Paul, we decided to go with the perk system, as that would probably allow for more replayability and had a couple of other advantages as well. For example, we originally planned to have two difficulties, normal and nightmare, but with the perk system we can just have a couple of perks that make the game more difficult. For example, enemies have more health, but you get more points and more XP, and that way we don't need difficulty settings anymore, which is fantastic. I just made some extra perks. As you can see, there are quite a lot now. Pumpkin fields makes the fields more expensive, but they also give more income. Walls and towers are sturdier, castle center produces gold, so there are lots of cool strategic options to choose from now. My next big construction site were screen markers, because we initially had this text at the bottom here, which told you about which enemies will spawn where in the next night. And this was actually not meant to be a placeholder. We were really like, maybe that's a cool opportunity for some light storytelling or something. Our playtesters were like, screw that, I don't read text. So now we're adding little icons, which, as we've already learned, was... Is it doing that? Definitely paid for with a lot of sweat and tears. But also, as always, if you try for long enough, you eventually get it working. Then I spent like another entire day on making sure these markers merge themselves into cute little groups like that. As you can see, Paul found a nice solution for the paths. Just one big path in the middle, and that's it. Speaking of paths, I had another incredible idea on something I wanted to try with my pathing tool. It's not doing that. But now it's working, and now I can super easily build cliffs right in Unity. So in all of the levels I build from now on, I can make use of the third dimension. At the path points, I can move them around if I want to. And I can even undo. Haha! Incredible. And I built a little bridge here, as you can see, which I think is very cool. So even the little bridge here, even that is built with the path maker I made. I didn't build it with this in mind, but it turns out to be like extremely useful for level design. I can block these things out so much better than with stupid little cubes. Not sure if you've guessed already, but what I'm building here is the tutorial. It starts out by telling you how to move, then it tells you how to attack, and you gotta destroy all of these test dummies here to get your first 3 coins, which you can then use to build your castle center. You learn that at night there are enemies you have to defend against. You learn that you have to build houses or mills to get a better economy, and you learn that collecting taxes is a lot of work. And I learned that units are still not freaking doing what they're supposed to when there's a wall in their way. Very sad. I thought I was done with that. This is me testing if you can die in the tutorial, if you play as bad as humanly possible, and I don't think it's possible to lose here. Every good tutorial needs some massive arrows showing you where to go, so I added that, which was nice because I could reuse the screen marker system I made earlier. Here's a little more tutorial time lapse. can't quite believe it either, but I found yet another fantastic use case for my pathing system, and that is for level boundaries, cause for performance reasons we don't want to give every single object in the scene like a collider or something. So we need something to prevent the player from leaving the play area, and this really gets the job done. We can no longer ride into the mountain. That is a feature. Let's play a round of Can you guess what Jonas is building here? Can you guess? Can you guess? Can you guess? Can you guess?
Can you guess? Can you guess? Can you guess?
Okay, it's a level select screen. I'm more or less just watching this with you right now, and I'm like, damn, yeah, right, I did that as well. Whenever a match ends, you get directed to this epic reward screen where you get some XP and unlock some new perks. Or, you know, to explain it to the Fortnite generation, it's a free battle pass. So now that we got a way to earn perks and weapons, we also need a way to select them before the match. So I built this quick mock-up UI, which doesn't work yet. Now it works. You can see I'm only able to select one up here, and I'm only able to select two down here. And of course, if you haven't unlocked something yet, it shouldn't show up. One thing you gotta know about me is I'm a nerd, so I wanted to have an analytics screen after the game, and that means I made one. For every day I work on this game, I just feel myself falling in love with it more and more, and this has happened before with my two previous games. This happened with Islanders, this happened with Will You Snail, but it's happening again now for Thronefall. I'm just utterly in love with this game, and I'm so grateful that I get to work on this with Paul. If you want to support us, the best way to do so is to wishlist Thronefall on Steam right now. There's a link to the game in the description. Wishlisting is of course entirely free, and all it does is it makes sure you get notified when the game comes out. Let's take a second to remember where we started this video, and you know where we started the video before that, or the video before that, where it all started with some very silly prototypes. Bloop.